They call us the First Legion, the Emperor's original sons, the ones who never break. That is the lie everyone believes. For a decade, I believed it too. When I was first given the bone-white armor, I thought it was an honor earned through faith and obedience. Only later did I understand the truth. The armor is not a reward. It is a coffin built for the living. I did not learn this truth during my trials, when pain stripped weakness from my flesh. I did not learn it while kneeling before the lion's statue, reciting vows older than most stars. I learned it on a nameless world, one I am forbidden to record, while staring down the barrel of my bolter at a child. She had seen something she was never meant to see. My finger tightened. The weapon kicked. The sound was sharp, efficient, final. Her body collapsed into the dust, and the secret survived. That was the moment everything changed. Before that shot, I was a warrior of the Imperium. After it, I was something else entirely. My name is Brother Sarafon. I am a dark angel. For 10 years, I walked the thin line between honor and necessity, between what the Imperium demanded and what the chapter truly required. I fought Xenos, crushed traitors, and never once hesitated when ordered to kill. But there was always another war beneath the war, a quieter one, a shame buried beneath 10,000 years of silence. The fallen. That word is never spoken aloud outside the inner circles. It is the wound that never healed, the betrayal that defines us more than any victory. We hunt them not for glory, but to erase the evidence that they ever existed. This is the story of how that hunt hollowed me out. My first true campaign after initiation was on Tertius Majoris, a world smothered in smoke and steel. Its skies had forgotten what stars looked like. Orc warbands had infested its northern manufactorums, and we were sent to cleanse the infection without damaging production. Simple orders, clean enemies, no moral complications. I welcomed it. Orcs do not beg. They do not surrender. They exist to fight and die, and we are happy to oblige. I was a line brother then, my armor still green, my faith uncomplicated. I fought beside Tactical Squad Amdus, following a sergeant whose voice carried centuries of experience. We descended through toxic clouds, landed amid fire and twisted metal, and began the work. 6 days of constant battle followed, structure by structure, corridor by corridor. I killed dozens, each death precise and righteous. My brothers moved like a single organism, bolters roaring, blades flashing. There was beauty in it, a terrible, intoxicating beauty. On the 7th day, everything shattered. An interrogator chaplain arrived without warning. His presence bent the air around him. He did not address the squad. He did not speak to the sergeant. He called for me. As I approached, I felt something I had never felt before in battle. Fear, not of death, of truth. He asked if I would accept a greater burden, a deeper loyalty, a duty that would consume everything I believed myself to be. I said yes without hesitation. I did not understand that I was agreeing to be buried alive. If wearing the armor is not an honor, but a sentence, what does it truly mean to be chosen? The truth was not revealed in a hall of honor or a chamber of relics. It was spoken amid ruins. We stood inside the remains of a Prometheum refinery, its walls blackened by fire and orc blood. Smoke drifted through shattered ceilings like the breath of a dying god. Behind the interrogator chaplain stood warriors clad in bone-white Terminator armor, silent, immovable, watching me as one might watch a blade being tested for flaws. The chaplain's voice was calm when he spoke, which somehow made it worse. He told me that the First Legion had never truly healed. He told me of Caliban, not the heroic version recited to initiates, but the truth buried beneath ritual and myth, of brothers who turned against brothers, of Luther's betrayal, of the lion's rage, of a world shattered not only by war, but by shame. The fallen were not legends. They were not cautionary tales. They were real, scattered across time and space when Caliban burned, flung through the warp like fragments of a broken mirror. Some emerged centuries after the heresy, some millennia later, some never aged at all, and every one of them was a threat. Not because of what they might do, but because of what they were. Living proof that the First Legion had failed. The chaplain explained the hunt with clinical precision. The capture, the interrogation, the repentance extracted through methods never recorded, the secrecy maintained at any cost. Entire worlds could burn to preserve the truth. Entire regiments could be erased. Witnesses could not exist. I remember wanting to speak, to ask why this burden still mattered after 10,000 years, to ask whether the Emperor himself would truly demand such bloodshed to protect a reputation. But I said nothing, because the chaplain was watching me, because the Terminators were watching me, because doubt, once voiced, could never be taken back. I was told that from this moment forward, my first loyalty was not to the Imperium, not even to the Emperor, but to the chapter, to the secret. I was reassigned immediately, detached from my squad, from the simple clarity of frontline war. I was attached to the Raven Wing, the hunters who followed whispers across star systems, chasing half-forgotten signals and impossible coincidences. My role was simple: containment. When the fallen were found, I would be there to ensure no one else survived the encounter. Guardsmen, civilians, administratum officials. It did not matter who they were, only what they had seen. The first time we confirmed a fallen's location, my hands trembled. The second time, they did not. By the third, I had learned to compartmentalize, to tell myself that the mission was greater than any individual life. That was the lie that made it bearable. The Raven Wing tracked a signal into the underhive of a forged city, kilometers beneath the surface, where forgotten people prayed to rusted icons and hoped the Imperium would never remember them. We found the fallen in a makeshift chapel, kneeling among laborers who believed him a holy hermit. He did not fight. He wept. He begged us to kill him rather than take him. And when the chaplain ordered me to silence the witnesses, I obeyed. 3 lives ended in seconds. The secret remained intact. As we departed, the chaplain placed a hand on my shoulder and praised my faith. I felt nothing. That terrified me more than the killing ever had. If silence feels easier than mercy, how long before the soul stops screaming? The killings blurred together after that, not because they were identical, but because my mind learned how to store them without feeling. Faces became numbers. Screams became background noise. Memory itself adapted, sanding down sharp edges so I could continue functioning. The Raven Wing moved faster than rumor. By the time most Imperial authorities realized something was wrong, we were already gone, leaving behind wreckage, revised reports, inconvenient enemies to blame. Orcs, cultists, reactor failures, accidents. There was always an explanation ready. On an agri-world choking beneath refugee overflow, we extracted a fallen hiding among displaced farmers. 200 civilians witnessed the operation. The solution was orbital fire. The official report blamed enemy artillery. The refugees were declared martyrs. I watched the strike from orbit. The sky split open. The ground vanished. I felt nothing. That frightened me. On a mining colony buried deep beneath a dead moon, we hunted another. The fallen had allied himself with labor rebels, people fighting impossible tithes and brutal overseers. They were not heretics. They were desperate. We exterminated them anyway. Their leader spat blood at my boots and called me a monster as she died. I did not argue. The Raven Wing praised my efficiency. Between hunts, we returned to the rock. The fortress monastery drifted through the void like a mausoleum, its corridors carved from guilt and prayer. Every stone felt heavy with unspoken confession. Chaplains watched constantly. Librarians listened even when they appeared absent. Confession became routine, but it was never honest. I learned which sins were safe to admit: hesitation in combat, insufficient zeal in prayer, fleeting pride. Real doubt was never spoken. Real questions were never voiced. Those who did, vanished. Brother Matthias had served beside me on Tertius Majoris. He was thoughtful, curious. One night, in what he believed was privacy, he asked whether the hunt truly served the Emperor's will, or whether it had become something darker. 2 days later, he was summoned for spiritual correction. He never returned. The official record stated he had volunteered for a penitent crusade. I knew better. After that, I perfected silence. I became what they wanted, a flawless instrument. My reports were immaculate. My loyalty unquestioned. I learned how to kill efficiently and explain convincingly. The Deathwing began to notice. They invited me into deeper briefings, shared fragments of the larger picture. I learned truths that would have shattered the man I once was. The fallen were not merely scattered across space. They were scattered across time. Warp fractures from Caliban's destruction had displaced some centuries forward. Others emerged decades late. Some appeared unchanged while empires rose and fell around them. I learned that entire sectors had been written off to capture a single one, that allied chapters had been abandoned mid-battle because a fallen had been detected elsewhere, that radical inquisitors were quietly appeased in exchange for silence. The secret ruled everything. The campaign on Gaia's Reach made the truth impossible to ignore. We deployed alongside the Angels of Redemption, a successor chapter who shared our gene line, but not our burden. At first, coordination was smooth. Then the Raven Wing detected a fallen presence. Orders changed instantly. Forces redeployed without explanation. Intelligence was withheld. Civilians began disappearing from sectors we controlled. The Angels noticed. Their captain confronted our interrogator chaplain, demanding answers. What he received were evasions wrapped in authority. Tension escalated. When Deathwing Terminators arrived unannounced, their presence alone ended the dispute. The Angels of Redemption withdrew, angry, suspicious, and wounded in pride. I watched their strike cruiser depart and understood something terrible. We were making enemies of our own brothers. But the hunt continued. We found the fallen in a mountain cave, protected by tribal communities who believed him a sky-sent guardian. They fought with spears and ancient firearms. We slaughtered them, men, women, children, anyone who had seen us. I killed more innocents that day than enemies in my entire early career. When the fallen was bound, he wept, not for himself, but for the dead around him. He called them innocent. The chaplain replied, "They knew you." Orbital bombardment erased the region. I felt something crack inside me. Not loudly, not dramatically, quietly, like a support beam giving way after years of unnoticed strain. That night I dreamed of faces, not accusing, asking. And for the first time since Tertius Majoris, I wondered whether necessity had become an excuse rather than a reason. If every justification ends in ashes, what happens when there is nothing left to justify? The rock was never silent. It whispered, not aloud, not in words that could be quoted or confessed, but in the weight of its corridors and the pressure behind one's eyes when alone. Every passage had been carved by hands that carried guilt. Every chapel echoed with prayers spoken not for forgiveness, but for endurance. I began to understand that the rock was not merely our fortress. It was our prison. Between campaigns, I walked its halls with measured steps, armor polished, posture flawless. To any observer, I was the image of a loyal son of the lion, disciplined, obedient, unremarkable in my devotion. Inside, something else was growing. The dreams worsened. They were not chaotic nightmares, but precise reconstructions. Faces appeared exactly as they had looked at the moment of death. I remembered details I should not have. The pattern of grime on a child's cheek, the tremor in a woman's hands as she raised them too slowly, the way blood cooled on stone. I tried to drown the memories in ritual. Longer prayers, more time in the training cages, voluntary penance cycles that left my muscles screaming and my thoughts numb. The chaplains noticed my dedication and approved. That approval felt like a chain tightening. I learned the rhythms of surveillance, which corridors were watched, which Vox channels were always monitored, which librarians listened not with ears, but with something far more invasive. Privacy was an illusion. Faith was performance. The only safe place was inside my own silence. On my next deployment, we hunted a fallen hiding within a shrine world, an ocean of pilgrims, incense, and fragile belief. The man we sought had lived there for decades, offering counsel, healing disputes, never revealing his true nature. When we seized him, the faithful tried to intervene. They believed we were defiling a holy place. Bolters answered their faith. Bodies fell between prayer benches. Sacred banners burned. Blood soaked into stone that had not known violence in centuries. The ecclesiarchy later declared it a Xenos-provoked riot. The shrine was reconsecrated. I stood among the ashes and wondered whether the emperor could still hear prayers spoken there, or if we had drowned them out forever. After that mission, I was summoned privately. Not by a chaplain, by a Deathwing veteran. He spoke little, asked fewer questions. His presence alone was judgment. He told me the inner circle had taken note of my consistency. I had not broken, I had not questioned, I had not failed. Those were not compliments. They were measurements. I was being weighed. The next hunt came faster. A research facility on the edge of a dead system. Adeptus Mechanicus. Neutral. Valuable. The Fallen had embedded himself there under layers of false records. When we arrived, confusion turned to protest. Protest turned to defiance. Defiance turned to execution. Tech priests demanded authority. We gave them silence. I killed 12 of them myself. Their augmented bodies sparked and twitched as they died. Binharic prayers collapsing into static. When the station was scuttled, 93 souls vanished in nuclear fire. The report listed it as a containment failure. No one questioned it. That was the most disturbing part. Not the killing, the ease with which truth could be rewritten. On the return voyage, I stood alone in the chapel and tried to pray. The words felt hollow. I realized then that I no longer believed prayer changed anything. It was maintenance, like cleaning a weapon that would be used again tomorrow. The chapter praised me. Commendations were added to a record no outsider would ever read. I was granted access to deeper archives, darker knowledge. The closer I came to the center, the less human everyone seemed. Veterans spoke of sacrifice with detachment, of necessary losses, of acceptable numbers. They did not sound corrupted. They sounded convinced. That terrified me more than madness ever could, because conviction does not question itself. One night, while staring at my reflection in polished ceramite, I understood the final truth about the rock. It does not hold us together. It contains us. Every brother who learns the secret becomes another stone in its walls. Another voice sworn to silence. Another life reshaped around protecting a lie. I was no longer asking whether the hunt was right. I was asking whether escape was even possible. And deep down, I already knew the answer. If faith becomes a cage, what happens when the prisoner stops believing in the lock? The Fallen we tracked to Elysium Mortis did not run. That alone unsettled me. The world itself was already dead, its gardens poisoned centuries ago by abandoned manufactoria. Flowers bloomed in shades of ash and black, harvested by malnourished workers whose lungs were slowly dissolving from the toxins they breathed every day. Suffering was so normalized here that despair had become routine. It was the perfect place to disappear. The Fallen had lived among the harvesters for decades. He worked beside them, shared their rations, taught them how to reinforce their shelters against storms and raiders. He healed when he could. He listened when no one else would. They did not know what he was. They only knew he helped. We breached the processing facility before dawn. Sirens screamed, workers scattered in panic. The Fallen stepped forward immediately, placing himself between us and them. "I will go with you," he said calmly, "willingly. Just let them live." I had heard those words before, too many times, but something about him was different. He did not beg. He did not rage. His voice carried exhaustion rather than fear. The chaplain did not hesitate. The order came. We opened fire. Bolter rounds designed to tear through power armor ripped unarmored bodies apart. The workers fell in seconds. Children collapsed where they stood, their small forms thrown backward by concussive force. I fired, because that is what I did. When it was over, the facility floor was slick with blood and black pollen. The Fallen knelt amid the bodies, tears cutting clean lines down his face. "You've become what we were meant to stop," he said quietly. "Not defenders, not angels. Executioners of the innocent." The chaplain struck him silent, but the words stayed with me. We burned the settlement. Orbital fire erased the surrounding region. The sector authorities were told a chaos cult had been purged. They thanked us. On the transport back to the rock, I could not escape the memory of the Fallen's eyes. They looked like mine. Not physically, internally. Haunted, exhausted, aware. That disturbed me more than any accusation. During interrogation briefings, I learned his name. Serial, one of the earliest to turn, a lieutenant under Luther. He had believed the lion betrayed them. He had lived with that belief for centuries until time, reflection, and suffering stripped it away. "I was wrong," he told us during a moment when the chaplain allowed him to speak, "and I have paid for it every day since." He asked for nothing, not mercy, not forgiveness, only that the people he protected be remembered. They would not be. Back on the rock, the dreams returned with new clarity, but this time, Sariel stood among the dead, not accusing, understanding. I began to wonder something dangerous. What if the fallen were not all monsters? What if some of them had already punished themselves far more severely than anything we could inflict? The thought was heresy. I buried it. The Deathwing summoned me soon after, not for interrogation, for evaluation. They spoke of my composure, my reliability, my ability to act without hesitation. They said I was ready for greater trust. I should have felt pride. Instead, I felt dread, because trust here was not freedom, it was proximity to the truth. The closer one stood to the secret, the harder it became to breathe. I was assigned to lead containment on the next hunt. That terrified me more than any enemy. Leadership meant choice, and choice meant responsibility. I realized then that obedience had protected me. Orders had been armor. Soon I would have none. The fallen we would hunt next was different. Older, smarter, more dangerous. And he was waiting for us. When the enemy reflects your own soul, how long can you pretend the hunt is righteous? Command changes everything. When you pull the trigger yourself, the weight is heavy but direct. When you give the order, the weight spreads into every life ended by voices that trust you absolutely. My first command assignment came sooner than expected. The fallen we hunted had taken refuge on a feral border world, a place the Imperium barely remembered existed. Its people lived in scattered settlements, clinging to half-remembered myths of the Emperor and ancient warnings passed down as fireside stories. The fallen had become one of those stories. They called him the Watcher of Storms. He warned them of raids, taught them where to build shelters, helped them survive. To them, he was not a god, but something rarer, reliable. The Ravenwing detected his presence days before we deployed. This time, the chaplain placed operational authority in my hands. Containment lead. Every decision would be mine. We descended at night. Thunderhawks cut through cloud cover without running lights. I positioned squads around the primary settlement, sealing escape routes before the inhabitants even knew danger had arrived. Protocol demanded total silence. Witnesses could not survive. As we advanced, I heard voices inside the dwellings, families speaking softly, unaware that judgment had already been passed. I gave the signal. Bolters roared, walls shattered, doors exploded inward. Panic followed instantly. Some ran, some froze. Some tried to shield children with their own bodies. My brothers followed orders flawlessly. I followed from behind. The fallen emerged from the largest structure, unarmed, hands raised. His armor was hidden beneath layered hides and scavenged metal. He looked tired. "This ends now," he said. "Leave them. Take me." I did not answer. I could not, because answering would mean admitting I had a choice. The Ravenwing secured him swiftly. He did not resist. He did not curse us. He simply watched as his people died around him. When it was done, the settlement burned. I ordered the fire. The words echoed in my helmet long after the flames rose. On extraction, the fallen finally spoke again. "You carry this heavier than the others," he said, eyes fixed on me. "That means you remember what you were supposed to be." The chaplain struck him silent, but the damage was done. Back aboard the strike cruiser, I reviewed casualty tallies. Clean operation, no survivors, no loose threads. Perfect. And yet my hands would not stop shaking. Not from fear, from ownership. These deaths were not distant necessities ordered from above. They were mine. The rock greeted us as it always did, unchanging, immense, indifferent. In the aftermath, I was praised. Efficiency, decisiveness, clarity under pressure. They said I had crossed an important threshold. They were right. That night, the dreams changed. I was no longer watching. I was commanding. Every face turned toward me, waiting, trusting, obeying, and dying. I began to realize the most dangerous truth of all. The chapter does not force monsters into existence. It trains leaders. Leaders who learn to justify anything once they accept responsibility for outcomes rather than actions. I tried to remember the man I had been before command, before the hunt, before silence became survival. The memory felt distant, unreliable, like a story told about someone else. The chaplain informed me I would soon face a final evaluation, not a test of combat skill, a test of judgment, one that would determine whether I was ready for the armor I had once believed symbolized honor. I knew then that whatever came next would require a decision I could never undo. And I suspected, deep down, that the chapter was watching not to see if I would hesitate, but to see what I would choose to sacrifice. When command makes you responsible for evil, is obedience still innocence? They did not call it a trial. They never did. Trials implied rules, boundaries, a chance of success or failure measured against something known. What awaited me was simply referred to as an assignment, delivered with the same calm tone used for every hunt. But I knew. This was the evaluation. The target was a shrine moon orbiting a dying gas giant at the edge of the Ultima Segmentum. Few ships traveled there. Fewer still cared. A single monastery maintained the site, its monks devoted to preserving the memory of a minor Imperial saint whose name had long since faded from most records. It was the perfect place to vanish. The fallen we hunted there was ancient, one of the first who had turned, a survivor not through strength alone, but through patience. Intelligence suggested he had lived among the monks for decades, offering wisdom, tending repairs, guiding prayers. He had not hidden. He had endured. I was given full authority over the mission. No chaplain at my side, no immediate oversight. Only the unspoken understanding that every decision would be weighed. We approached under total stealth. The Thunderhawks descended without lights, engines throttled low. The monastery appeared below us. Stone buildings clustered around a single chapel whose spire reached upward like a plea unanswered. I deployed my squads in silence, sealing exits, cutting Vox traffic, ensuring isolation. Protocol was clear. Absolute containment. I entered the chapel alone. The fallen knelt before the altar, robed in simple cloth, his armor concealed, his head bowed in genuine devotion. He did not turn when I entered. "I wondered which of you would come," he said softly. "You walk heavier than most." I raised my weapon. "You will come with me," I said. "Resistance will result in termination." He smiled, not mockingly, but with weary recognition. "I will not resist," when he replied. "But before that, answer me one thing. Do you still believe this is justice?" I did not respond. Instead, I ordered my squads to secure the structure. Outside, the monks stirred. Confusion spread. Fear followed. The fallen rose slowly to his feet. "You see," he continued, "they will die for knowing me, as so many others have died. And still, you call it duty." I told him to be silent. He did not. "You hunt us not because we threaten the Imperium," he said, "but because we remind you of what you lost, the truth you buried." His words struck deeper than any blade. I received confirmation. Witnesses detected. The choice arrived. I could follow protocol, or I could hesitate. I gave the order. Bolters fired. The monks died in their sleep, in prayer, in confusion. Stone walls cracked. Candles fell. The chapel filled with smoke and screams. The fallen watched it all. "You have passed their test," he said quietly as we bound him, "but failed your own." We extracted him alive. The monastery burned. On ascent, I stared at the moon shrinking beneath us, reduced to ash and silence. No praise came immediately. That was worse. Back aboard the strike cruiser, I reviewed my report. Perfect execution. No witnesses. Target secured. Yet I felt no triumph, only certainty. This had never been about whether I would obey. It had been about whether I would hesitate, and I had not. That knowledge settled heavier than any armor. If passing the test proves you are lost, what remains when victory feels like failure? They did not congratulate me. There was no ceremony, no words of affirmation, no acknowledgement that I had passed anything at all. Instead, there was waiting. Days passed aboard the Rock with no new orders, no summons, no reprimand. That absence spoke louder than any verdict. I was being observed in stillness, measured not by action, but by how I endured uncertainty. Silence, I learned, was another test. When the summons finally came, it was not from a chaplain, it was from the Deathwing. I was led deep into the Rock, beyond halls known even to veterans, into chambers where the stone itself felt old and watchful. Here the air was colder, thicker. Every step echoed like a confession. They did not ask me to kneel. They did not need to. The armor waited. Bone-white plates rested upon a rack of obsidian metal, immaculate and terrible. I had seen Deathwing warriors before, walking monuments of duty and destruction, but standing before the armor stripped away all illusion. This was not protection, it was a statement. To wear it was to declare that you knew the truth and would carry it until death. The Grandmaster spoke only once. "You understand what this means?" I did. Understanding was the problem. The ritual followed ancient forms. Armor plates locked into place one by one, each seal accompanied by words spoken not for blessing, but for binding. Oaths layered atop older oaths, tightening until breath itself felt regulated by tradition. When the final plate sealed, the world became quieter. Not physically, internally. The voices that once whispered doubt did not vanish. They were buried. As a Deathwing initiate, I was granted access to records never meant to be read by line brothers. Fragmented archives, half-erased testimonies, interrogation logs that ended abruptly. I saw what happened to the fallen we captured. Not redemption, not forgiveness, erasure. Some broke quickly. Others endured for decades. All were eventually reduced to silence. I also saw what happened to brothers who faltered. Memory alteration, reassignment, disappearance. The hunt did not tolerate instability. I was assigned to accompany a senior Deathwing veteran on a cleansing operation soon after my elevation. The target was minor. The casualties were routine, and yet something had changed. No one questioned my presence. No one monitored my tone. I was trusted. That trust was more dangerous than suspicion, because trust removed witnesses. In the quiet moments between missions, I stood before my armor in its maintenance cradle and studied my reflection in its pale surface. I looked complete, finished, but inside I felt hollow. The armor did not make me stronger. It made me quieter. I understood then that the Deathwing was not a rank. It was containment. Those who knew too much were not eliminated. They were absorbed. Their doubts sealed beneath layers of duty until nothing remained but obedience. And yet, despite everything, I felt something unexpected stirring beneath the silence. Not rebellion, resolve. If the armor existed to suppress the truth, then truth was still alive. And if truth still lived, then silence was not the same as agreement. For the first time since Tertius Majoris, I allowed myself a forbidden thought. What if the hunt could end? What if the secret could be buried without more blood? The thought was treason. I did not dismiss it. If silence is enforced to keep truth buried, what happens when the truth refuses to die? The fallen we found in the Sigma Verge did not hide among the faithful. He hid among the forgotten. The system was dead by Imperial standards. Stars burned thin, trade routes collapsed, data centuries out of date. A single Mechanicus outpost clung to a drifting rock, cataloging stellar decay no one intended to act upon. It was the sort of place where records went to die. Perfect cover. Intelligence identified the target as Gabriel, young by comparison, displaced by temporal fracture. He had arrived decades ago with nothing but a forged history and the discipline to keep his head down. He served as station security. No sermons, no heroics, just vigilance. When we breached the station, confusion spread through the halls like static. Tech adepts demanded clarification. Servitors froze mid-task as alarms echoed. I moved with a Deathwing escort, every step echoing authority. We found Gabriel in the central data core. He stood alone, weapons holstered, helm removed. "I knew this day would come," he said. "I only hoped it would be later." He did not beg. He did not deny. He asked for one thing. Let them live. He told me everything before interrogation protocols could begin. Names, locations, patterns. How the fallen survived by avoiding significance, by choosing obscurity over influence. "We do not threaten the Imperium," he said. "We threaten your story." I knew the script. Capture, silence, cleansing. But something had shifted. The station's personnel had seen us arrive, heard orders, watched us secure Gabriel. Containment would require total erasure. 93 lives. Again. I looked at Gabriel. He looked back without fear. "You already know what this costs," he said quietly, "so choose what it buys." For the first time since donning the bone-white armor, I chose without permission. I killed Gabriel. One shot. Clean. Immediate. Mercy. Then I lied. I ordered the station sealed and fabricated evidence of catastrophic reactor instability triggered by Gabriel during apprehension. Data logs altered, timelines adjusted, blame assigned. The Deathwing accepted the report because it fit expectation, because it required no new questions. We departed as the station burned, its destruction recorded as tragic but routine. The Mechanicus would mourn briefly, then move on. No interrogation, no witnesses hunted. I had broken protocol, and for the first time, fewer people died because of it. The truth settled heavily. The hunt was not maintained by necessity. It was maintained by habit. Back on the rock, I waited for reprisal. It did not come. That terrified me more than punishment ever could. Silence meant success. I had learned the final lesson. The system does not see morality. It sees patterns. And as long as your lies match the expected shape, they pass unquestioned. I stood before my armor that night and realized the unthinkable. The hunt could be manipulated, not ended, but bent. The cost was deception layered atop deception, a different kind of damnation, but one that spared lives. I understood then that I had crossed the most dangerous line of all. I was no longer merely trapped. I was choosing who lived. Rehook. If a lie can save lives, is it still corruption or the first step toward redemption? Lies do not echo. They accumulate. After Sigma Verge, I expected consequences. Interrogation, psychic scrutiny, a chaplain's quiet summons that ended with doors sealing and memories unraveling. None came. Instead, there was a tension. Subtle, clinical, persistent. Deathwing veterans began appearing where I trained. Librarians lingered longer than necessary during briefings. Questions were asked, not about outcomes but about process, tone, timing, judgment. They were not hunting proof. They were measuring deviation. I learned to answer without substance, to speak in forms the chapter expected, precision without detail, regret without doubt, loyalty without warmth. The next assignment arrived quickly. Another fallen, another backwater world, another opportunity to test the shape of my lies. This one had embedded himself among a frontier militia, training settlers to defend against raiders. He had become indispensable, which made him dangerous. I was assigned oversight only. Another Deathwing veteran would lead the operation. Observation role. I understood the message. We descended at dawn. The settlement awoke to armored giants emerging from mist. Panic spread instantly. The fallen attempted to surrender. The commander ignored him. Protocol was followed. Witnesses were eliminated. When it was over, I stood amid bodies I could have spared. I said nothing. Silence was safer. On return to the rock, the chaplain summoned me at last. His skull helm reflected my armor back at me. Bone white mirroring bone white. You are efficient, he said, but efficiency without alignment becomes unpredictability. I waited. Do you doubt the hunt? The question was surgical. No, I answered. The truth hid in what I did not say. He studied me for a long moment, then dismissed me without judgment. That unsettled me more than accusation. I realized then that my margin for error had vanished. One inconsistency, one misstep, and the silence would end. I began cataloging my lies the way others catalog weapons, maintaining them, refining them, ensuring compatibility. I stopped trying to save everyone. That was impossible. Instead, I focused on minimizing collateral, a delayed extraction here, a revised casualty report there. Small alterations, each one harmless alone, together dangerous. The dreams returned with new clarity. This time, the dead did not accuse. They watched, as if waiting to see what I would do next. I understood then that I had traded one prison for another. Obedience had been simple. Deception required vigilance, and vigilance required isolation. The chapter still believed I served it. That belief was my shield. But shields crack, and I could feel the fractures forming. When every eye watches for failure, how long can a single man hold the lie together? The intelligence arrived incomplete. That alone was unusual. Fragments of Vox traffic, inconsistent timestamps, a trail that bent backward on itself as if reality had folded. Librarians flagged it as a possible temporal echo, one of the rare displacements caused by Caliban's destruction. A fallen out of time. The implications were immediate and catastrophic. If captured alive, he would confirm everything. The scattering, the temporal fractures, the truth that the chapter had spent 10 millennia suppressing. If killed publicly, questions would follow. If erased quietly, the pattern would break. The target had emerged on a civilized Imperial world, populated, administratively stable, and watched. He had taken the identity of a mid-level administratum official, competent enough to be trusted, insignificant enough to avoid scrutiny. He had done everything right. The order came directly from the inner circle. Capture, not termination. Alive. I understood what that meant. This was not a hunt. It was a reckoning. I was assigned operational command. Not oversight, not support. Command. They were watching. The operation unfolded in the open. No orbital fire, no erased settlements. Too many eyes, too much data. We moved surgically, quiet apprehension. No witnesses eliminated. The fallen surrendered immediately. He was young, far too young, unscarred by centuries of survival. His eyes held confusion rather than resignation. "I don't understand," he said as we restrained him. "I woke up here, decades after Caliban. I've served the Imperium faithfully. I've harmed no one." I believed him. That was the problem. Transport was secured, interrogation teams prepared, librarians ready. The system would close around him, erase everything. During transit, he spoke again. "They told us the lion betrayed us," he said quietly. I believed it. Then the warp took me. I woke up alone. I chose service because it was all I had left. No grand ideology, no corruption, just a mistake. The rock loomed ahead in the viewport, and I understood with brutal clarity what would happen if we arrived. The dungeons, the pain, the silence. A brother destroyed not for what he had done, but for what he represented. I could not bend this outcome. I could not lie it away. There was only one way to prevent it. I ordered the transport diverted. The escort hesitated, then obeyed. I accessed the weapon controls personally. One shot, clean, final. The fallen died without understanding why. I filed the report before anyone could question the deviation. Catastrophic containment failure. Target terminated to prevent uncontrolled revelation. It was the truth, just not the whole truth. The silence that followed was absolute. I waited for the knock, the summons, the end. It did not come. Instead, a single message arrived. Report to inner sanctum. No accusation, no praise, only inevitability. When mercy shatters the rules, does survival demand confession or one final lie? The inner sanctum was smaller than I expected. No grand chamber, no towering statues, no audience of judgment. Just stone, ancient and bare, carved long before the Imperium learned how to pretend its sins were holy. The walls absorbed sound. The air felt still, as if even echoes feared to linger there. I stood alone. They arrived without ceremony, not as a council, but as inevitability. Figures emerging from shadow one by one. Deathwing veterans, interrogator chaplains, librarians whose eyes never fully focused on the physical world. No weapons were raised, none were needed. "You chose mercy," one of them said at last. Not an accusation, a statement of fact. "Yeah," I replied. Silence followed. "You chose it repeatedly," another voice added, "with intention." "Yes." I did not explain. They already knew. A librarian stepped forward, presence pressing against my thoughts. Not invading, not probing, simply confirming. Truth rippled outward. They saw everything. Sigma Verge, the altered reports, the diverted transport, the final shot. When the pressure withdrew, I expected the end. It did not come. "You believe the hunt has become corruption?" the chaplain said. "Yes." That word echoed louder than any bolter. Another pause. Then the final truth was spoken. "So do we." The admission struck harder than condemnation ever could. They did not deny the blood. They did not defend the lies. They did not pretend innocence. Instead, they revealed the last layer of the secret. The hunt no longer existed to redeem the fallen. It existed to contain the chapter, to prevent schism, to keep the truth fragmented, to ensure no single brother ever carried enough doubt to fracture the whole. You were never meant to succeed, the Grandmaster said quietly, only to endure. I understood then. The armor, the silence, the absorption, the disappearance of doubters. It was not punishment. It was load-bearing. I had not broken the system. I had proven why it existed. You will not be executed, they said. You will not be erased. Relief flickered, then died. You will remain Deathwing. You will continue the hunt, but you will do so knowing exactly what it is. That was the sentence. Not death, not absolution. Awareness. They dismissed me without ceremony. No chains, no escort. I walked out of the inner sanctum alone. Back to my chamber. Back to the armor. The bone-white plates waited in their cradle, pristine and patient. I looked at them and finally understood the truth I had circled since Tertius Majoris. The armor is not a symbol of honor. It is a coffin, and it does not bury the dead. It buries the living. Tomorrow I will don it again. I will lead hunts. I will issue orders. I will lie with precision. I will kill when necessary. And sometimes when I can, I will choose mercy, quietly, invisibly, without hope of redemption. Not because I believe it will save the chapter, but because it reminds me that something human still survives inside the coffin. I am Brother Sarafon of the Deathwing. I am loyal, I am damned, and I walk onward anyway, because the coffin moves, and it wears my face.